How you doing, Ashley? Good, how are you? Doing great. Thanks. Since everybody carries around with them, coordinated clocks and cell phones and everything else, it is 7 o'clock and everyone on Zoom is looking to tune in. So we're going to start right at 7 o'clock. 6 o'clock. Currently have a daughter in Nepal and a daughter in England, and so I'm struggling with time zones. But welcome all of you. This is a really great crowd. We'll remind everyone that there is some provided food in the back, which is meant for no one in particular or everyone who shows up, and you're welcome to that. My name is McKay Jensen, and I'm part of Neighborhood District 2, just like you. And while you're interested here, we have a full agenda. So I'm just going to take care of a couple of housekeeping businesses. The microphones. The microphones usually work great if you turn them on and tap once. So to get it going, this is the deal with the microphones. It's not just so that you can be heard in the room, it's so that people in Zoom can hear you. So if you don't hear yourself over these speakers, that means that everyone that is tuning in on Zoom cannot hear you at all. And so questions or comments that there is usually ample time for, please call for a microphone and be just a little patient while we get one to you. There are agendas in the back. It is very helpful since we do take some votes here in this meeting. If you also sign in, just to let us know who was here, and then also you can pick up that agenda. And speaking of that agenda, we're going to go right now to item 1A, which is a traffic report from our city engineer.
Okay, well, let me grab a pointer too. Do we have him back there? Okay.
You got one?
Yep.
Because I got one too.
Okay, I have, let me just apologize right up front. You have a long meeting tonight. I have 4 presentations for you tonight. The first 3 should go fairly quickly, and then I'm teaming up with, thank you. I'm teaming up with one of our consultant members that I'll introduce later. So this one here is 560 North, 900 East crosswalk. Everybody's probably familiar with this crosswalk. Right now it has flags. Speed limit on an arterial street on 9th East is 35 miles an hour, but we all know that they do faster. And that crosswalk hasn't seen much change since I was a student 35 years ago. So I guess I don't have a clicker. So the next slide. Let's see if we can go through this. Okay, so here's the location. Everybody's probably pretty familiar with this. Functional classification is an arterial. We have, 19,000 vehicles on 9th East daily at this location. Next slide, please. So I looked at the crash data for the last 3 years. There were no injuries, but we had 2 total crashes, both in 2022. You can see the crash data information, dry roadway service, clear weather, the daylight conditions, one at dark. Manner of collision, one was front to rear because they stopped for a pedestrian, got hit from behind. The other one was a left turn angle crash. Next slide, please. So here's the location of the 2 crashes that I put on the map. In urbanized area, we look at crash data for 3 years. In rural areas, we tend to look at a little longer, like 5 years. Next slide, please. So here's the current crosswalk, is just this white one going across the corner here. Our proposal is to move up the crosswalk to here in between 560, the 2 560s. So let's go to the next slide. This is what it looks like today, and this is what it could look like if we do this project. So we have a raised median there. You can see that that we separate the 4 lanes. We have flashing rapid beacons here, so people can push and it will flash. Hopefully cars stop and then the pedestrian can move forward. Next slide, please. This is the east view. So that last one was looking north. This one's looking east. This is what it looks like today. And this is what it could look like if we implement this project. This does restrict left turns. So no more will we have the left turns running into each other in the two-way left turn lane, or as people call it, the median or suicide lane. Right turns only coming out of 560. But we have a good area network of a grid pattern, so it's not too much inconvenience. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like looking south, and this is what it could look like if we implement the project. So you can again see the three rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and it really provides for much safer crosswalk and, quite frankly, safer for pedestrians and safer for motorists. One more slide, I think, and then we're probably done with that. This possible solutions. We can construct the crosswalk as I have planned. We just leave it as is, which I don't think is a good option. We have one question now. When you ask questions, you have to wait for the microphone to get to you. And we have one question back there, a comment.
Is that crash data you presented exceptional, below normal, acceptable, unacceptable?
For that location and for the speed of the road, it is a fairly conservative or low crash volume at that, but not all crashes are reported. So I do need to say this is the reported crashes in the last 3 years at that intersection. Yes, ma'am.
What does that do to the width of the biking lane there? There's no designated bike lane, but we all bike up to BYU there. And it looks like now there's even a narrower car and bike zone.
Yeah, my goal is to not have bikes on 9th East. My goal is to do wayfinding, which we just did a bike ride 2 weeks ago with Bike Walk Provo to identify locations to move all our bicyclists over to 8th East, where we have the Sharrows, which is a 25-mile-an-hour road instead of 35. So I feel much safer as a bicyclist on 8th East than I won't even try 9th East. Okay, I have 2 more or 3 more presentations before we move off this issue. I will be presenting this at Neighborhood District. What's the other one, Rachel, I get to go to? Anyway, across the street so they can also see our plans here. Okay, this one is the no left turn. So let's go ahead and go to the slide on this one. Next slide. Okay, here it is. So on 9th East, BYU has a road that kind of circulates over to the creamery. Some people know where that's at, right? And then down and then around. It's kind of a circuitous route. That backs up for people that want to make a left-hand turn. You all know how busy 9th East is. And what happens here is it's just one lane. So if someone's stopped at that stop sign trying to make a left across 2 lanes of traffic and a center turn lane and then 2 more lanes of traffic, and then there's an access directly across this coming out of, I believe it's another parking lot right here. So what happens here is it backs up and people cannot even make a right turn, even if they wanted to, a free right. So I met with BYU, and here's some of the topics that we discussed. Next location, next map slide, please. Okay, so we could keep the existing conditions, which doesn't do any good for anybody. We could prohibit left turns during peak hours. We could prohibit left turns all the time, or the one is install a right turn lane and keep the left turn movement available. So there's some options there that we can do. I've communicated this to BYU. It is their road, so I don't have a lot of jurisdiction and authority on this one. However, they do impact traffic on 9th East when they try to shoot the gap and, cause some problems that way. A lot of people, will turn right and go through the parking lot of the BYU housing to go south if they're going south. So BYU is aware of the problem, and I've met with their new director, their vice president of physical facilities and engineering and planning. really nice guy. And so he's going to take a look at that over the summer, and they're going to take a look at what improvements they can do. Any comments or questions on this idea? Yes.
Another issue that I've talked to BYU about on a weekly basis that is a concern that I'd love for the city to know about is the rogue pedestrian crossings just north of that. I probably see 10 a week of people who with a higher invincibility quotient than I do crossing right above that, that makes that left turn even kind of more frightening. And I will remind that there was a fatal accident there probably 15 years ago as well in that similar space. So I think anything that we can do to help that would be very much appreciated by the neighborhood.
I thought we removed that crosswalk. Is it the crosswalk you're talking about on University Parkway, or at the traffic signal, or the one that used to be just north of this intersection?
It was the one that was just north of that intersection.
Okay.
The crosswalk is gone, but the pedestrians remain in force.
Yeah,
Hard
the
habits, hard
pedestrians basically from the creamery all the way to the MTC, they just come across in that spot. So
Okay.
all the way that distance. Yeah.
Well, it's not a crosswalk per se, but as motorists, as soon as the pedestrian steps off that curb, we're supposed to stop. Okay, just so everybody understands the state law there. It's not a safe place to cross. That's why the crosswalk was removed. But hey, we're in our cars. We got climate control, right? Those pedestrians and bicyclists don't. So give them a break in that respect. Any more comments or questions on this one? Okay, let's go to the third one.
I mean, I understand that your list for BYU is comprehensive of what they could look at. Is it possible that you could look at if they, that the city could look at maybe a curb down the middle of 9th East there to go, we made a decision that we just don't want that 4-lane. I mean, I think that some of the other things are better, but if I think something. Was that an option?
We got a question over here too, or a comment over here. This gentleman right here, second row.
A curb down the middle of 9th East would be a terrible idea, because then you couldn't turn left into that street.
Yeah,
And I do that. I do that a lot.
do you go to the creamery? Love the ice cream. I think
It's not a problem. If I see somebody turning left, then I turn right into the parking lot and take the next exit out to 9th.
I guess there is times when it backs up where you can't even get to the parking lot to make a right, is what I'm hearing. But
Not
maybe
in my experience, but I
Right.
believe that happens.
Yeah. So we want to maintain a good relationship with BYU, and they're a major traffic generator. They're a major employer in the area. They're not going anywhere. And so we're trying to cooperate and come up with the best solutions. Yes. Could I put a raised median in there and prohibit left turns in and out? Probably so, but it's probably not the right thing to do. Okay, anything else on this one? Okay, let's go to the third one. Oh, so 6 months ago, I was here presenting on your speed sign. So we put a your speed sign on southbound Slate Canyon Drive. Let's go to the slide, and you'll see that we put it in October 16th. And I just wanted to report back to you. Go ahead and go to the next slide. What some of the data is being pulled up. So you see November all the way through April, you see the average speed, the 85th percentile, which means 85% of the vehicles or motorists or bicyclists or pedestrians are going this speed or lower. Okay. There's always the few bad apples, right? The few bad apples that kind of come from the tree, but anyway. So average weekday volume, and this is always interesting to me, is to see that their average weekday volume is about 3,400 every week that you're experiencing on that road, and about 2,977, so 3,000 on weekends. So it's busier during the weekday. I looked at the peak volume on that, by the way. So Sunday's your lowest volume, and then depending on the month, it could be Monday, it could be Wednesday, it could be Thursday for your peak volumes, but you're 8 a.m. peak, 5 p.m. peak. I mean, there is no that doesn't change on this particular road. Comment.
Yeah, the speed data is a little skewed because that sign is more up the hill and the speeders really get going past the sign and coming around the corner. So it's a little misleading, I
Well,
think.
I put the speed sign on the slope going to downhill slope. If we need to relocate it, we could look at relocating that sign, but I wanted to get it before they get too far, so they're reminded to slow down. I could put it at the very bottom of the hill and it could be 35, 38, but the problem is then they're doing that through your houses. So that's why I put it up a little higher. So very good comment. Yes, sir. We got a second row right here.
So how does this compare to the speed before you put in the sign? Isn't that the more interesting question?
Yeah, and I showed that 6 months ago. And I can't remember what it is.
So we have no idea whether this is doing any good?
Yeah, we had it up, but not on for like 2 weeks. And we see what the speed was before we were giving the drivers any feedback. And so I showed that.
So is this an improvement?
Honestly, I can't remember. You can look at it from 6 months ago. I just can't remember 6 months ago. Catherine?
I believe if I'm remembering correctly from that
Tap it.
I believe if I remember correctly from that meeting, it's very similar data. It didn't, things didn't get worse. They didn't significantly improve. It's about the same as when the sign was up and recording data, but not flashing at the drivers. So.
And I have a 3-slide presentation. If you wanted, I can send it to you that shows the 2 weeks before and then the 2 week, and then you have the data now. So any other comments or questions? Okay, let's go to the next slide on this one. Okay, don't need the contact information. Okay, so we'll present that this is a citywide issue that we're presenting to all 5 neighborhood districts. And we're presenting a lot of locations about our Provo River Bridge and Trail at 820 North. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that. With me is Thomas McMurtry. We're going to tag team this presentation and we'll go through kind of high level because I know you got a lot on your agenda tonight. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here's what we'll talk about: our goals, our background. We'll talk about the planning context, potential cross sections for this bridge. We'll talk about what public involvement we're doing, and then we'll seek some comments and questions. That's the picture of the Provo River Bridge at 820 North. Just so you know, the Provo River Trail runs underneath that. And there's also active transportation on top with very narrow sidewalks and a narrow shoulder that's not truly a bike lane, but functions as that one. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the major goal of this is to just upgrade safety. This bridge is old and it's getting worn out. We want to provide better connectivity and comfort for our sidewalks and active transportation users, for those walking on the sidewalks, trails, and using the bike lanes. And then we want to support connectivity by making sure that we plan for a 75-year lifespan for this particular bridge. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like today. And many of you are familiar with this bridge. Next slide. So the bridge was constructed in 1960. So it's still older than at this point. But the design life was probably between 50 and 70 years back at that time. We can now try to design our bridges for a 75-year life cycle. The bridge deck is 80 feet long, 40 feet wide. There's over 11,000 vehicles a day going over this bridge. And then the National Bridge Inventory does list some deficiencies on this particular bridge. We started planning this about 20 years ago when we started to get some National Bridge Inventory concerns. And then about 10 years ago, we started to do some preliminary engineering of just understanding what the costs were involved. So about 6 years ago, we put in an application in front of the Mountain Land Association of Governments to obtain some funding from the Utah County transportation tax that we all pay here. So we received that funding, and it's going to be available in 2025, so next year. So we want to design it this year and build it next year. Let's go to the next slide, please. Existing issues with the bridge. I think anybody that's been on this, and I'll just use a pointer here. We got a narrow sidewalk. It doesn't even connect on the northwest corner. We got bike lane width is not sufficient. Parapet height, I could fall over that pretty easy. I'm a little top heavy. Weight limit is insufficient, and the sight distance. And of course, we had a terrible incident there December of 2022, and where it resulted in a fatality. And that was because a left turn movement, because they didn't have a really good line of sight. They tried to cut through and they weren't paying attention to see if there's any pedestrians across the way. Next slide, please. So underneath, we have the Provo River Trail, which is really a gem of Provo. The trail width is only 8 feet wide. It's not very high. So the vertical clearance, the horizontal clearance is bad. The trail grade coming down into it and coming back up out of it is steeper than we would like. John, what's the ideal 5% coming up out of there? 5 to 8% coming up out of there, and it's steeper than that. Our connectivity to the street is again an issue too, both for the trail and for other streets that connect to it. Next slide, please. So just in summary of existing conditions, it's 64 years old. We have over 11,000 vehicles today on it. Over 100,000 people use the sidewalk or bike across that bridge on an annual basis. And more than 200,000 people bike or walk or rollerblade, scooter, whatever, underneath the bridge. So it is really a gem of Provo City in that respect. The Provo River Trail is just awesome, but it's too narrow and we got some issues. So just incidentally, to let you know, this is kind of the third bridge because we're going to be improving. John over there in Parks and Recreation is going to be improving State Street Bridge underneath it, and also the Columbia Lane Bridge, both over the Provo River. But what's going to be improved is underneath. So that Provo River Bridge is going to have better height, or Provo River Trail is going to have better height and better width as we go through that. Next slide, please. We'll go to the planning context. So let me just get the 400-pound gorilla out of the room right now. That's an I-15 interchange. I don't control interchanges. It's not on our plan. People talk about it, and people have been talking about it for 40 years there. That's a Federal Highway Administration and the Utah Department of Transportation decision. And if they ever make that decision, and if they ever get money to do an EIS, then we might know where an interchange might be. But they will look from anywhere from Center Street in Provo all the way up to University Avenue in Orem. So they'll look at 500, they'll look at 800, they'll look at 1460, they'll look at 1730, they'll look at 2000, they'll look at, you know, all those different types of roadways, right? So we don't have it in our plan, but we know that we need to certainly improve this bridge and improve the structure before it falls down. Next slide, please. We talked about they don't have funding to do an environmental analysis. If they ever get funding, then I think they'll do an environmental analysis and check to see if there should be another access on I-15 into Provo some year. Next slide. We have it in our Provo City Transportation Master Plan for active transportation from Geneva Road all the way over to 7th East and a little bit to 9th East, where we have a trail on the south side of 800. And so that's something that we are going to plan for and try to implement with this project, but it will only be for a few hundred feet by the river bridge. Next slide. Okay, this is our multi-use path as well, and it shows it going all the way over. Next slide, please. Just a interesting thing, we got to work around our well housing here. You guys probably seen this right next to the Provo River Bridge. So we do need to keep in mind, and then everything begins with the river first. When we're doing design for a new bridge, the river kind of sets the precedent of everything. So we kind of have to make sure that we're not making the skew worse, making flood potential worse. We have a base flood elevation that we have to start with. So that we don't want to make a big hump over the river because that blocks our view as users of that facility. So it really is going to be a tricky design. And that's why we have gone outside our city and hired a consultant who specializes in structures to design this for us. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Thomas McMurtry. He's a consultant working on our public involvement, and then we'll take some comments and questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Vern. Vern did a good job of kind of setting the stage with this particular bridge and specifically talking about that it's deficient. The 64-year-old bridge is pretty narrow. The current cross-section looks just like this. It's about 40 feet wide. It has substandard bike lanes that are really, I mean, we're showing 4 feet, but in some cases it's not narrower than that. There's a 5-foot kind of sidewalk on the side, but most of a section of that, 15 feet or so, is covered by that giant kind of steel guardrail. So it's really only about 3.5 feet wide. So the current bridge is quite narrow, as well as, we've kind of got 11-foot lanes, which aren't substandard, but they can be kind of tight. And so we recognize that the current bridge configuration is likely not going to work for the future of Provo. If you go to the next slide, please. We have looked at thinking about how can we kind of reconfigure this. That third goal of planning for connectivity for the next 75 years is something that the city certainly wants to address. In thinking about that, we've looked at some potential options for a new bridge and a new bridge deck. And one of those might be upgrading the current width to a minor arterial standard. In a previous slide, Vern indicated that the current road classification is that of an arterial. Then arterial is even a little bit wider than this, and I'll show you one of those in a second. But if we upgrade the current bridge width to about 71 feet wide, then it could look something like this. And this is just an option for, what the bridge deck would be, or the things that we're looking at. You can see here, you can kind of accommodate 3 lanes, more comfortable bike lanes, and wider sidewalks. He also showed in that previous slide, there's an idea of doing a trail on the south side of 820 North. And you can kind of see that indicated over here of about like a 10-foot sidewalk if we ever kind of get to that trail. Next slide, please. In thinking about future connectivity and whatever bridge deck we kind of put in place, we want it to be flexible enough to be able to serve the city into the future. And part of that is thinking about future demand and future traffic. And so if we were to go with a 71-foot bridge deck, like we were just showing, and we ever needed to be able to accommodate more traffic, then we want to make sure that it's flexible to do that. And so that 71-foot bridge deck, if we needed 4 lanes in the future, could look something like this. This might not be ideal because we've got maybe some substandard bike lanes and some things, but we could still kind of squeeze, that additional traffic in this particular configuration. These are the type of things that we're still like thinking about and kind of preparing for as we look at the design. Besides considering a minor arterial cross-section, we're also looking at the full arterial. Rachel, if you go to the next slide, please. It's currently classified, the roadway, as an arterial. The entire roadway is classified as an arterial. The arterial cross-section standard is 99 feet wide. So that's the standard for an arterial, which its current classification is. If we do go with maybe a 99-foot wide bridge deck, then it would, it could look something like this, where, it's a little bit more comfortable. You can see wider bike lanes, and we've got wider sidewalks, and you can have full 12-foot travel lanes, those type of things. You can kind of like accommodate more comfortably all of the modes of travel that we kind of need with a 99-foot bridge deck. However, we don't think that we might need all of this traffic. The idea of a 5-lane road might be something that could exist during the 75-year bridge life. However, it wouldn't be needed now, right? We're looking at about 11,000 cars a day. And so if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we're thinking about is building a bridge deck that's going to serve the city into the future, but making sure that the roadway is comfortable for today and serving the city today. And so we think that the bridge could be transitional, which would allow for a wider bridge deck, but a narrower road. And so we can, try to right size it, if you will, kind of build it correctly today, and then kind of still have a comfortable road. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you kind of what that might look like in a cross section. So this cross section allows for like the full wider bridge. You can kind of see like the edge of the bridge and then having those transitional zones on the side so you can still have a narrower roadway, but be prepared with kind of like a wider bridge. And so these are the things that we're starting to think about. And as we're like considering the bridge and the bridge deck and the best way to kind of serve the community going forward, we haven't made any decisions about this. We're still kind of in the initial stage of like looking at trade-offs. Besides the cross sections, there's a couple of other things that we need to think about with the bridge deck. Next slide, please. And those are really like the placement of the bridge and kind of how the road and the neighboring streets kind of interact with, how we do it. These two images, the one on the top and the one on the bottom, show those two different widths, the minor arterial width and the full arterial width, like that's 71 and 98 feet, but kind of show the bridge at some different placements and what it would kind of do. Besides looking at both the bridge width and some of the placements, we also want to make sure that the roads function well into the future. And part of the concern and the safety issues with the approaches on the bridge deck are the sight distance and the fatality that we had on these adjacent roads. And so to improve the safety of those, we're probably looking at closing off full access on 820 from 900 West and 850 West. So this road would kind of be closed off, and then these folks would have access over here. And the same thing is true with 900 West. We're looking at kind of closing those off with whichever cross section we go with, whatever the bridge design. We kind of want to make sure that it's safe and serves the community going into the future. Rachel, if you don't mind, maybe clicking through that was the final slide. So I just want to say that, like, regardless of kind of the things that we're considering, we're open to different ideas. And that's one of the reasons that we're starting to have these conversations, both with you guys and then other organizations. We are looking to reach out to the public, and Stacy will kind of like talk about the plan that we have for doing that.
Thanks, everyone. Can you go to the next slide, please? So we do have a philosophy for public involvement on this project. We want to listen to what you have to say. We know there's a lot of people with different opinions about what's happening on the bridge. So we are here to listen to what you have to say. We want to be very proactive and transparent as well about the information that we provide to the community. And so we do have a couple of things that we're going to be working on. The first one you'll see is inform stakeholders. Stakeholders are really the folks who are in the agencies that we're going to be working with in Provo. They're larger businesses. They're people who we just need to make sure know about what their concerns and questions are with this project, but also want to make sure that they understand what we're doing and what the schedule is going to look like. Neighborhood outreach is our second big thing. So you'll see us out and about at different events over the course of the summer. We are planning on having a public open house on June 6th. That will be at the Provo Recreation Center, and we'll be sending out some information about that soon. We'll also be at some of your neighborhood meetings, and then we'll be attending all of these meetings through the middle of July. The final thing is citywide information. So we want to make sure that everybody knows, not just the folks who live right around this area. We'll be using things like newsletters, utility mailers, social media, and some other tools to help get you the information that you need. But right now, we do have a website, and we do have these really great business cards, and we have some flyers. So these are cards that have our hotline number on them. You can call us if you have questions. You can send us an email if you have questions. It's also got our website, and that's where we'll be posting presentations like the one you're seeing tonight, and all of the information we're creating about the project will be available there. So you can go take a look at it, spend some time with it. If you have questions or you have concerns or you just want to make some comments, you can email us or call us, and we can take that information from you. So I have a huge stack of these up here. Please grab some for me if you'd like one, or you'd like to hand some out. And our contact information is also on this slide as well. So please let us know what questions and concerns you have. We are here to help you navigate this process and make sure that your voices are included with what we're doing. So I'll turn it back over to Vern.
Thank you, Stacy. Stacy Adams, she's leading our PI effort. Thank you so much. Thomas and Stacy did an outstanding job of sharing with you some of the challenges and some of the things we're looking at when we do build a new structure. Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am, right there.
We ride bikes a lot, and we've ridden that road a lot, and it's scary. What about, rather than bike lanes, do a wider trail on one side? It feels so much better when you're not right on the road. Just an idea.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid comment. People like you and me prefer to be on the trail, right? But there's also that commuter traffic that doesn't mind. The experienced bicyclist doesn't mind riding on the pavement because they don't want to get the sidewalk, yeah. Right.
If you go, Rachel, if you go back maybe 5 or 6 slides, we did in fact include that exact idea. So that's why you saw like when we looked at the cross sections on most of these, like if you go back you could stop right there. There's a 10-foot, we called it a walk, but that's basically a trail on the south side. So this area is not a bike lane, but is 10 feet wide to give, people who don't want to ride on the road as much comfort as they can. You're right. We've talked about that. There's probably value in both because there are going to be some hardcore cyclists that don't want to mix with moms on strollers or pushing strollers or whatever. And so we think there's value in looking at both a trail and maintaining bike lanes. That's a great question.
I'm just wondering if you go to a 4 or 5 lane bridge, how that's going to impact the rest of the road down the way, especially that roundabout that you run into, So are you looking, if we go that wide, are we going to have to widen the road further down to accommodate?
I think that's a future question. Certainly, the roundabout is for a single lane in each direction. And so that would have to be part of any discussion for any potential widening in the future. Right now, at 11,300 cars a day, it doesn't warrant a 5 lane. But we're experiencing a lot of growth on the west side. And the city's invested in new sewer and new infrastructure on the west side, brand new high school on the west side. There's a lot of positive things happen out west. And, if there is a need within that 75-year life cycle of that bridge, we certainly want to plan ahead and not have to tear down the bridge to build something wider. I don't want to be short-sighted. Any other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
I think a heavy consideration with that, if you're looking 75 years into the future too, with what was said back there, like that resonates with me a lot. I don't even cycle on the roads a lot, but it's a huge safety issue. But also if you maximize not just pedestrian traffic, but also traffic on wheels of all sorts. Within the last 10 years, how many more types of wheels have you seen moving around? A lot, a whole lot more. And so that's going to happen more in the future. Obviously, we all know that. And so if you accommodate that now, it not only has a potential mitigation on the traffic flow, maybe not, maybe significant, maybe not, right, but also so you're funneling some of that through where people feel safe. If you put that as paramount within the development of this, the wheel traffic safety, for lack of a better term, that I think you're going to promote that more, and it could reduce traffic. But also I think the safety concern is a lot bigger than anything else.
Great comment. We call them bike lanes, right? But what do we see in those bike lanes? We see scooters,
glass. Well, only glass from all the cars and the dirt and debris. They're really, bike lanes are very impractical from a safety perspective. They get all they're not safe.
They do collect some stuff from the travel lanes, don't they? But at the end of the day, I've seen the one-wheelers, I've seen the scooters, I've seen the electric bikes in there. The e-bikes and e-motorcycles are making a huge impact. So you're right. We don't know what transportation technology is going to be like in 50 years. And we don't know what type of improvements. Years ago, we just had the bikes in the bike lanes. Now we have all types of things in the bike lanes. Very good comment.
Thank you.
Just one comment.
Yes.
A couple of thoughts. One, I wonder about the impact about Timpanogos Elementary School. I know that there's a crosswalk that goes north to south across 820, not very far from here, that I see every day with one very intrepid but not very visible crossing guard and a lot of little kids. So I would just encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to make sure that Timpanogos Elementary School is involved in this process, which obviously requires a proactive thing because it's not a community, that school doesn't serve a community that has a lot of time or access to being vocal.
Very good point. I ran out of room on the list of all those folks that we're meeting with, but we'll be meeting with the Provo City School District as well. So thank you for that reminder. Anything else? Just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. We got some flyers and cards here. It's great to see such a wonderful turnout. You care about your neighborhoods, you care about your community. Thank you for your time. This is not easy. You got other things you could be doing, but really appreciate your involvement.
Chaz, let's just go right on. We're trying to make up a little time now on the agenda. Yep. So, oh yes, Chris, I'm sorry. Yep. C, emergency communications. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Blinzinger. I'm the Provo City Emergency Manager. My main objective tonight is to talk to you about our emergency notification system. There's some cards in the back and there's a poster in the back. There's a QR code on there that you can scan to register for the emergency notification system. 20 years ago, they had reverse 911 and they called everyone's house phone. How many of you still have a house phone? So there's not a phone book for cell phones and there's different carriers. And so if we had to contact or send out a message in an emergency for protective actions, a lost person, something, an evacuation route or something, we have more difficulty. So if you can register for that, this is only used for emergencies. Has anyone ever received an emergency notification from Provo or know that you're registered? Wonderful. How many of you have ever received an Amber Alert on your phone? Great. That's exactly what we're talking about. You don't get those very often. That comes from actually from the National Weather Service who send those out. So we have a Provo internal system for our residents, and we're asking you to register for that. And you can register your name, your phone number, how you want to be notified, email or phone number. You can also register for another location. This is a county-wide system. Provo has a part of that. If you have someone in the county that you are concerned with their welfare and their well-being, you can also put their address in there and register for them to be notified if there's an emergency in their area. Second thing I want to talk about is we are in the infancy of organizing our amateur neighborhood ham radio communications system. And if there's any ham radio operators out there that are interested or would like to be involved, we've got about 12 individuals, residents from around the city right now that are willing. This is to be able to share information into the city in an emergency, and we're kind of developing that program, what kind of information we're looking for, frequencies and stuff like that we have designated. So please, if you're interested, you can get a hold of me. Rachel knows how to get a hold of me. So third thing I want to say real quick is in a society that we are now, and there's lots of divisions, we've been through COVID and we've been through everything else. Please, there's this mantra of get a kit, make a plan, and be informed for personal preparedness. But check on your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors across the street, next door to you. Check on them regularly. If you don't see them, it's a sad story when we fire department or police respond to a place. We haven't seen the neighbor for a month and the windows have been closed, the blinds are closed. We go in there and find something that's not great. And check on your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors or someone in your neighborhood that you can check on. Your designee, someone you check on once a week. Check on is, hey, how's it going? Hello. Make sure you see them out there. Check on your people. That's part of your preparedness, and also that's part of taking care of each other. Any questions? Wonderful. That's it. Chris Blinzinger, Provo City Emergency Manager, and Rachel can get a hold of me if you need to.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me now? A lot better. Okay. So I was asked to, if you didn't hear that, give an update on the 1,000 Trees project that we have going with the city of Provo. Currently, we have about 427 trees planted within that project, and those are trees that go into vacancies that are not, brand new development. So those don't count towards the 1,000 Trees Initiative. But any vacancy throughout the city that, we hadn't plant trees in before, or older trees had died in those areas, and for whatever reason, they weren't planted back into those spots right away. Those are the areas that we were targeting, and we have 427 trees in there currently. And we're looking to, fill that 1,000 tree, goal, right? So, a few areas I was asked to look at in particular, and I did drive all of these spots within the district, and just to see where we could plant new trees and have planting projects. So on 300 North, on the corner of 300 North and 9th East, there's a church there on I guess it would be the northeast corner, and we could feasibly put about 8 trees in right there. Also, yeah, on the opposite sides of that, there aren't trees inside of those park strips, but there's also no water, and we look for park strips that are at least 4 feet in width, and those are about 2 to 3. They just don't sustain a really good tree within those, and eventually they just buckle the sidewalks and end up being a bigger problem than we ever wanted them to be anyway. So we kind of just don't look to put trees in those areas, and look to put trees. Right now, our standard code for new park strips is 7 feet. So any of the new trees that go in, they're going into a 7-foot wide park strip. And yeah, and also a lot of the older, more historical neighborhoods have 10 to even 15-foot park strips. And that's where we're really trying to focus on getting these trees in for the 1,000 Tree Initiative. I was also asked to look on 9th East. So on 9th East, on the corner of 9th East and State by Provost Elementary School, there's a really good park strip there we could put a planting project together for. Most of the park strips along 9th East, though, are narrower than about 3 to 4 feet, so we're not looking to put trees there. Slate Canyon Drive in particular, there's where there are usable park strips, they're filled with trees, and everything else along there is just undeveloped land that doesn't have any water to it. So it wouldn't really do us any good to put any trees in there if they're not going to be watered. So that's where we're at with that. There's a church on Nevada and Slate Canyon Drive right around that little bend right there. We could put like 25 trees in there. That'd be a pretty good planting project. And then right just, I guess, south of that spot is where Spring Creek Elementary School is. And as long as there's water in there, it is rocked through that little park strip there. But if there's water inside that park strip, we can put trees in. Go ahead. Because there's no water. Okay. Well, I don't know that we put any trees there then. That wouldn't do us any good. But if for whatever reason the school district wanted to put water in there, we could put trees in there. I wouldn't be against that. Not only that, we could put like low-lying vegetation in there, make it look really nice in front of the school. Yeah, and we're more than willing to put together planting projects if you guys, if inside of your neighborhoods you get together as a district and you guys want to put together a project, we're more than willing to fund the trees to go into this project. We've done a bunch of them in the Timpanogos neighborhood, Joaquin, Mazer, Dixon neighborhoods, just outside of anything that we would have normally done anyway. So if that's something you guys are interested in, please get together and get with me, the city forester. My name's Chaz Addis, and we'll put together a planting project for you. Other projects we're doing currently, we were just awarded $370,000 through Forestry, Fire, and State Lands to go into disadvantaged neighborhoods. And unfortunately, like most of the areas I was asked to look at are not inside of a disadvantaged neighborhood as far as the government's concerned. But we are putting together some projects right now. We have about 300 spots inside of the Dixon, the Timpanogos, and the downtown areas where we're slated to put new trees in as part of that project. And with those monies that we're able to get through the government, That's going to put us above 1,000 trees, about 1,076 trees. It'll complete that 1,000 trees initiative, but that doesn't mean we want to stop there at all. We want to keep going and planting as many trees as we possibly can, because the idea is to have tree-lined streets. Big mature trees actually require less water, and the turf underneath it requires less water. Not only that, it helps you conserve energy inside of your house, less cooling, less heating, that sort of thing. Anything else I wanted to mention? Oh, we did just do another Trees for Energy and Water Conservation event last week where we gave away 200 trees to residents, and we're doing another one in September, just like it. So look out for that as well. But any questions?
So the data that you use to determine that the Provost area is not a disadvantaged neighborhood probably comes from a census record.
Okay.
But there's a recent one that was released, I think last year in the summer. So what year census data were you looking at?
It's just the map that they gave us, as far as they said you can plant within these grade areas. And I could
Okay.
share that map at some point, but it's certain sections within the city.
It's
yeah.
just hard to imagine that a Title I school does not fall within a disadvantaged area.
Right. Yeah. And when I got the map, I thought to myself, why didn't they ask us where these disadvantaged areas are and where they could use more trees and where the heat islands are within our cities? Because with a little bit of empirical data and a little bit of boots on the ground knowledge, I think we could have, honed in those areas a lot closer and put trees in exactly where we thought we'd need them. But we are getting some money, and I'm not going to complain about that. So we are going to put a whole bunch more trees in the ground, but yeah, hopefully we can continue with this, tell our story as far as putting these about 650 more trees in the ground. And hopefully in the future, they'll give us more money and hopefully look to us to figure out where those trees should go. Anything else? Any other?
What varieties of trees are you putting in?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of different types of trees. We're looking at we've been doing a ton of Zelkovas and a lot of different elm varieties, only because they're super hardy. They could deal with our salinity levels really well, especially on the west side. I didn't really think about this before I became the forester of Provo, but we put a lot of salt down, right? So that we can clear sidewalks and such. And as the snow melt comes off, it takes all that leftover salt and stuff and it runs it all the way down to the lake. So the salinity levels and the pH is super high on the west side. And so we have to cater those areas to certain types of trees that are more hardy than others. Everybody loves the maple tree, but anything basically west of Fifth West, maple trees are going to do well. They're down there. And so we're not looking to plant anything that's super sensitive, but there's a lot of good trees out there that are hardy for our zone that do well. And we've just kind of been picking and choosing. But there's a whole bunch of different varieties. And we do have a tree selection guide that you can look at if that's something you wanted to see. Anything else? All right. Appreciate it, guys.
Since I saw nobody else stand up, I decided to. I'm John Bunderson with Provo City Parks and Recreation. I'm the Parks Planning and Project Manager. We have a number of park improvement projects spread across Provo City, and we are introducing one new project, and I wanted to give also an update on a current project at Rock Canyon Trailhead. But we'll start with the new proposed small project for Foothills Trails Park. We would like to build an off-street parking area that's temporary in design until the park is fully developed at a later time. But this is the exhibit in front of you is on 1450 East. Peaks Boulevard comes up and ends and then comes into this cul-de-sac to the south of Seven Peaks Boulevard. And this would come off of that cul-de-sac onto Provo City property and allow 20 parking stalls for people to access both Foothills Trails Park and the Bonneville Shoreline Trail a little bit uphill and east of this parking area. This project was proposed by our Parks Trails crew, who has been very active up at Slate Canyon and all of the Foothills Trails Parks, as well as our paved trails down in Provo. And they saw a need for an off-street parking area in and around the Foothills Trails Park to help keep people or provide better access into this area. There would be a bike repair station that would be included as part of this, and would like tonight to get some feedback from you and the neighborhood, District 2, which I hear is second to none, of if this is a favorable improvement or if this is something you'd not like to see in the short term.
Hi, yeah. So I live right below that, so I can see out of my front door this area. I walk it every morning. And so I think it's a great idea, because what happens is people park even though it says no parking on the cul-de-sac right there, and then they leave all their cans, bottles, trash, everywhere. And so I think it's great. Because it's actually a very highly utilized, everybody from up